Most Norse necklaces you see online today are probably wrong. Not because the individual pieces are fake, not because Vikings would almost never wear all of this at once, especially not a warrior. This necklace looks impressive, very impressive indeed. A Thor's hammer, bright beads, multiple pendants, colour everywhere, and it is on a leather thong. This may say more about modern reenactors than the Norse themselves. Now, before anyone throws a drinking horn at me, I am not saying Vikings never wore jewellery. Of course they did. Men wore arm rings, finger rings, cloak pins, pendants, chains, and sometimes beads. A Thor's hammer pendant on a man. Absolutely believable. A few beads? Also believable. 1, 2 or maybe 3 beads on a male necklace. That fits the archaeological evidence far better. But this is where we begin wandering into the dangerous marshlands of modern reenactorism. And yes, I've done it myself. I am guilty, because modern reenactors love beads and we love to compete with our fellow warriors. We love colour. We love shiny things. We love looking like we've just robbed a Byzantine jewellery store and staggered back into Scandinavia carrying the entire market. But the Viking Age was not a costume party made of glass beads and leather scraps. Every bead meant something. Every bead cost something. Some of these beads were imported. They came a good distance in travel, and some would be made more locally. Some beads travelled enormous distance through trade routes stretching across Europe, the Baltic, the Frankish lands, and even into the Islamic world. And the most important thing is to remember this: modern beads are cheap. Viking Age beads were often not. Now, you sometimes hear people say a single decorated bead could be worth a month's wages. I'd be cautious with that exact figure, because that's difficult to prove precisely, but the general idea is absolutely correct. Decorated beads, imported beads and fine glass work could be valuable prestige objects. For instance, fine glass vessels were often desired. These were not throwaway decorations bought in bulk online at 2 in the morning. Now let's actually look at this necklace. We've got multiple blue glass beads. We've got decorated pattern beads, yellow beads, white speckled beads, several pendants, a Thor's hammer, 2 coins or brachiotet style pieces, a throwback from the Roman age, and what appears to be Freya-inspired pendant or possibly a winged design. And then there's another pendant I'm honestly not fully certain about, and that's important because good archaeology sometimes means admitting uncertainty. Now visually, this necklace is stunning and beautiful. As a modern Viking-inspired piece, I generally like it, but as something a Norse warrior would likely wear around his neck every day, that's where I start slowly backing into the weeds, because this many beads starts becoming archaeologically less convincing for men. In many Viking Age male graves, you may find 1 or 2 beads, occasionally a few more, and sometimes none at all. But female graves, especially wealthier burials, can contain large beads, assemblages worn across the chest between oval brooches, and that tells us something important. Beads were often associated with women's dress, wealth display, family status, trade connections and identity. A wealthy woman wearing imported beads and jewellery was displaying the prosperity of the household itself. It sent a message: this family has status, this household has wealth, this household has connections, and that matters, because modern reenactors often accidentally compress the entire Viking Age aesthetic into one outfit. We combine mythology, trade goods, symbols, pendants, colours and multiple centuries of influence into a single necklace, because visually it instantly reads as Viking, but history is usually quieter than fantasy. Real Viking Age people were probably more restrained than modern media suggests. Now, the Thor's hammer on this necklace is probably the strongest historical element. Mjölnir pendants absolutely existed. They appear in archaeological finds across the Viking world. A single hammer on a cord or a chain, very believable. A hammer with 1 or 2 beads, still believable. But once you start adding multiple large decorative beads, several pendants, bright colours everywhere, and extra symbolic pieces all together, now we are drifting away from the probability and closer towards the modern fantasy Viking atheistics, the modern fantasy Viking theme. And this is where people often misunderstand historical criticism. Saying something is less likely does not mean it's impossible. That's important. Archaeologically works on possibilities, but there has been one eccentric Norseman somewhere wearing half a treasure chest around his neck. Possibly. Human beings are weird. We've always been weird. But when we look at the broader archaeological patterns, larger beads, heavy necklaces are much more strongly associated with female dress than male warrior identity. And honestly, that actually makes the story more interesting, because instead of imagining a warrior stomping into the battle, jangling like a wind chime made of expensive glass, I imagine something else. I imagine a husband returning from trade or raiding with valuable beads. I imagine gifts, marriage, family, status, relationships. A man may have owned wealth, silver, jewellery and imported goods, but necklaces like this arguably make more sense as gifts to wives or female family members. Not because women were decorative ornaments, far from it. Women in the Viking Age often controlled household wealth, keys, textiles, trades, goods, and social status within the home, and even the weapons chest. Jewellery could represent power, family prestige, connections, inheritance. And suddenly this necklace stops being just a Viking bling, it becomes a social history. Now, these coin-like pendants are interesting as well. These resemble brachiotex style or coin-inspired pieces. The Norse absolutely used silver coins, hack silver and imported currency in fascinating ways. Coins could become pendants, silver could become wearable wealth, but again, context matters. Are these direct replicas of archaeological finds or modern Viking-inspired interpretations? Without comparing them to actual finds, I'd be cautious about claiming too much. And the same applies to the so-called flare pendant. Most jewellery makers often label anything with wings, birds, cats or feminine imagery as flare. Sometimes that's inspired by genius Norse symbolism. Sometimes it's more modern mythology than hard archaeology. And there's nothing wrong with inspiration. But inspiration and evidence are not always the same thing. And I think that distinction matters here. Because historically, accuracy is not about removing the magic, it's about sharpening it. One bead can tell an incredible story. One bead may have crossed continents. One bead may have passed through traders, craftspeople, families, women warriors, and generations before ending up in a grave or around someone's neck. That tiny object may have travelled further than most people in the Viking Age ever did, and that is extraordinary. Which is why I think modern reenactors sometimes accidentally turn wealth into wallpaper. We had too much, too many beads, too many pendants, too many symbols, too much fur, too much leather, too much "look, I'm a Viking," until eventually the outfit stops looking historical and starts looking like a souvenir shop just exploded somewhere near Valhalla Airport, or the TV show Vikings. Now don't get me wrong, I still like this necklace as a modern Viking inspired piece. It's fantastic. It says something about my status. But if I wanted a more archaeological, believable male warrior necklace, I'll strip it right back. 1 Thor's hammer and 1 or 3 beads. Simple, understated, expensive looking rather than overloaded. Because in the Viking Age, wealth was often shown through quality, not quantity. And honestly, that feels more like power to me. So the real question is not, is this necklace Viking? The better question is, who would most likely wear it? And based on the archaeology, I'd argue this necklace makes far more sense within the world of female status display, gift giving, wealth and household identity than as a daily necklace of a Norse warrior. And somehow that tells a much richer story, because the Viking Age was never just men with axes. It was families, trade, marriage, craftsmanship, belief, status, memory, and tiny little beads carrying the weight of the entire world. But what do you think? Would you wear this necklace as a warrior, or would you gift it to someone important in your life, like your girlfriend or your wife? Let me know in the comments below. And the sources for this video: Vikings Online, beads, overview of Viking Age beads, materials, rarity and value. The Viking Answer Lady, Viking beads and necklaces, discussions of Viking Age beads, finds, grave evidence and trade. Vikings Online, Thor's hammers, overview of Mjölnir, pendants in the Viking Age. Haldar, Viking, did Viking men wear necklaces? Discussion of male grave evidence and the smaller beads counts associated with men. Glass beads of the Viking Age, research on trade, manufacture and archaeological distribution of Viking Age bead. And until we meet again, it is goodbye from me.